As well as charts, Power BI has some tabular visualizations you can use to look at your data. So for example, this little icon lets me insert a table. And I can start adding fields to this to start building up a textual set of data. You'll actually get that by default if you use a text field from your model as a visual. So if I just tick category, you'll see that a table will get created for you by default. As I add more fields, you'll see more columns get added into that table. And we can do things like resizing and moving the table just like anything else, but I can also grab the columns themselves to resize them. That little black arrow that you get when you hover over things indicates that when you click it, it will sort the table based on the values in the column that you click. You can also double click on the column separators to auto size the columns based on the data that's available. And you'll see if you've got a particularly large data set, as you scroll through it and more data gets loaded, those columns might need to resize. Particularly if you're, if your data, you go and pull back some more data that's got very long strings in it, it might need to be resized. If I start to add numerical fields to this, such as our unit sales or our year-to-date revenue, you'll see the totals row gets turned on at the bottom of this table, and we can see the overall total unit sales and year-to-date revenue for all of our categories, segments, manufacturers, etc. Those headers and the total rows are kind of pinned to the top and bottom of your visual by default. So as I scroll through it, I can always see those totals and the headers. The other way that you can lay out your data is a matrix visualization. So that's this little icon here. And you'll see in the field, well, I get a few different options here. I get rows, columns, and values. So let's put our units back in values, and let's look at our different category sales. And this time I'm going to put our year on the columns. And here I get this kind of cross-tab view, more like a pivot table in Excel, where I can see my different category sales down the rows. And for each column, I've got a different year. I can scroll left and right through this as well. And you'll see I get a column with the total unit sales over on the right-hand side. The other difference with a matrix is that when I add multiple levels into our rows, you'll see how you don't get repeated values in each one of these. It's more sort of stepped in, again, kind of like a pivot table in Excel. Let's take a look at how you can format these visualizations in different ways. I'm going to go back to a table just to build something simple. Let's look at our category, segment, and the sales for each one of those as well. Over on the formatting pane, there's a whole range of options that you have for these tables. You can do things like setting that auto size. So whether when you load more data, do the columns automatically get bigger and smaller based on the type of data in there. You've got a slider to just set the text size. So if you want to get bigger or smaller text, you can change that. And you can turn the total row on and off. You've also got a whole range of options to change the formatting, things like the colors, the size or the layout of elements like the grid lines, the actual values in your data, etc., etc. So let's do things like changing the column headers. I could make that a yellow color, and then maybe on my values, I want to set like alternating background color rows. So let's change between white and this sort of yellow color, or I can make maybe a nicer gray color to just make it easier to distinguish when you're reading across these different rows in the table which values correspond to which categories. If I wanted to add some more grid lines into this, I can do that here as well. So for example, under grid, I'll get options for my vertical and horizontal grid. Turn on our vertical grid lines, and you can see I've got some options to make them bigger or smaller, change the colors of those. I could produce a fairly garish looking table if I wanted to combine all of the different colors together. I'm recommending that you keep it simple, try and minimize the number of different options that you use here, but you've got a lot of control over making these things look exactly how you want. Okay, the last thing that we can do is actually set the background of cells in a table or matrix based on the value of the data. So this is kind of conditional formatting where I can say, I want to have red for low values and green for high values. Let's take a look at how that works. So you can see my field well. I've got our revenue field. And when I click on the drop down for that, I get this conditional formatting option. This will pop up a dialog where I can choose which values and what colors I want to map to those values. So by default, you'll get a light to dark sort of scale. And if I hit OK, you'll see now the formatting has been applied. So the background color of the cells in this table is changing based on the values. So the highest values are the darkest green. I can also change this to use a diverging scale. So for example, if I had some variance to a target, I had negative and positive numbers, maybe I'd want to use red to green then. If you're colorblind, maybe you want to use some different scales. It's a common challenge. But you get the idea. I can apply a bunch of different formatting based on to format the background of these cells based on the values within it.